Sabah al khair and good morning, everyone. My name is Sophia Kagan. I'm from the International Labour Organization, and I'm so excited to be with you today to be moderating this panel on cross-border collaboration in reporting on labour migration. I think this is a unique topic that many of you might not be familiar with, and so I'm really pleased to be here with you today to the virtual participants who are joining online, and of course my three esteemed panelists who I will introduce in just a moment. So I think most of you will already be familiar with the International Labour Organization. We are the part of the United Nations that deals with labour rights. And of course, migrant workers, like any other workers, benefit from the international labour standards and the rights that all workers should have to decent work. We also know that migration is increasing. It's becoming sort of rising in prominence in political discourse. And yet we also see that with the rising migration that there is an increased number of migrant workers who are in forced labour. Indeed, migration is one of the critical features of the number of workers who are in forced labour. And we see that this is happening increasingly around the world, but perhaps especially in the Arab states, where there is the highest prominence per capita of victims of forced labour. And we have seen some incredible journalistic reporting on issues that migrant workers face in our region from ARIJ and from Arab journalists working in this region, including in cross-border collaborations. Issues of debt bondage, of unfair recruitment, passport confiscation, incredibly low wages and dangerous working conditions. And what we see is that even despite the increase in the prevalence or information about the violations against migrant workers, at the same time we are also seeing a hardening of attitudes towards migrant workers around the world and including in this region. Migrant workers increasingly scapegoated for all sorts of issues in our society, vilified and stereotyped. And this is precisely what we as a collective community, but especially in the ILO within our migration department, want to change. The stereotypes, biases, and the lack of migrant voices within migration reporting or general reporting on migration. So as the ILO, we try to do this in different ways. We support the development of different toolkits and resources for journalists who would like to report on migration issues. This includes, for example, the Media Toolkit for reporting on forced labour and fair recruitment that we developed in multiple languages, including Arabic, some years ago. As well as media monitoring exercises, which we did in Jordan and Kuwait, to look at how journalists are currently reporting on issues of migration. And it echoes something that came out of just the previous discussion when it was mentioned that an article that was reporting on migrant domestic workers did not actually interview domestic workers themselves. This, unfortunately, is something that we found quite common between both the two media monitoring exercises that we conducted. That more often than not, when a piece was about migrant workers, it was negative, it was about criminality of migrant workers or migrant workers stealing jobs, other sort of economic or financial ramifications of migration, and very rarely the sort of human stories, the actual voices of migrant workers themselves. So to do this, of course, we need journalists such as yourselves, but we also need journalism students because it is at this point in their journey to become future journalists that their mindsets and perspectives are really shifting and evolving. And so for that reason, we were incredibly proud to conduct an exploratory fellowship between Ugandan and Jordanian students both sort of through training as well as sort of collaboration in terms of developing stories to look at the situation of Ugandan domestic workers in Jordan. So during this panel, we'll go on to talk about the experiences of this fellowship as well as another fellowship which we are now conducting between Côte d'Ivoire and Tunisia, but really to zoom out a little bit more broadly and to look at what are the advantages, what are the possible ways in which journalists and journalism students can really collaborate in this cross-border way to ensure better, more rights-based, more accurate, and more empathetic reporting on labour migration. And you can imagine that this is precisely the topic on which cross-border collaboration would be most beneficial, because in order to report on the issues of migrant workers from one nationality in another country, you really need those relationships of trust that perhaps a Filipino journalist is more likely to have with the Filipino community working in Kuwait, for example, but also the Kuwaiti journalist who brings their own understanding of Kuwaiti society, their networks within Kuwaiti media, that ensures that whatever is the product of this collaboration is something that is going to be read not just by Filipino society, but also Kuwaiti society. It's really critical that this kind of cross-border reporting on labour migration reaches a wider audience. So, without further ado, let me now introduce our wonderful panellists, starting with Ruba Zaidan. Ruba is the Assistant Professor at the Media and Journalism Faculty at Middle East University in Amman, here in Jordan. She earned her doctorate from the University of Navarra in Spain, focusing on news engagement and consumption in the Arab media. She has a background in journalism and digital media, and has a number of sort of interests within these issues, including on combating online hate speech. We then have Safa Baroudi, who is an independent journalist and human rights activist. She's participated in many different projects, including with the Centre for Protection and Freedom of Journalists, and she's represented Jordan at the International University Debate Championships. She was also a student at Middle East University, where she participated in the fellowship that I mentioned earlier. And finally, we have Malik Khaldi, who is a journalist with Radio Shams FM, one of the largest private radio stations in Tunisia, where he's worked for over the last decade. And since in 2017, he was awarded the prize for Best Informative Radio Program on the subject of human trafficking by the IOM. And he's also the sole media representative of Tunisia's National Authority to Combat Trafficking in Persons. He teaches investigations, communications at the Press and Information Sciences Institute in Tunisia. And in addition to these panelists, we'll also be hearing from via video link from some students who have participated in various cross-border activities, including some that I already see in the room. And I hope that we'll have a lively discussion after our panel debate. So starting with you, Aruba and Safa, you both participated in the ILO's cross-border fellowship earlier this year, which involved selecting, training and mentoring students in Uganda as well as in Jordan to report on the issues of Ugandan migrant workers in Jordan. I'd love to hear about your experience, and perhaps to start with Safa, if perhaps you can tell us a little bit about why, as a student, you decided to participate in the fellowship, and what was something new or interesting that you learned through the experience.
شكرا جزيلا صوفيا. في الحقيقة
Thank you so much, Sophia. My participation was because I believe that there's a dire need for collaboration among journalists, cross collaboration in reporting more accurate and more realistic reports today in the world of media. We don't merely need to do our narratives or to tell our stories as much as we need to produce them in a way that narrates the reality. So my participation in this fellowship and my collaboration with the Ugandan students, we worked on a number of themes. The first one was how to see how employment, immigrant employment, how is it promoted in the media in terms of some hatred speeches in some of the media discourse. The other theme that we worked on is the regulatory system here in Jordan that have to do with the employers and the employees. The last theme was about the reality that a worker experience as he starts his work. So we found a number of gaps, especially when they would start with the work and accessing or reaching out to these female workers, just as employers sometimes try to hold some ID papers or documents of the workers and prevent them from the right to these documents, and thus this really hinders their job and their experience or work. In addition to when we monitored some of the female workers who work domestically or at home, we thought that they are being promoted as a commodity when it comes to human trafficking, and their pictures are used in a very indecent manner. Or maybe the office would promote or would say that they can sell them or replace them if there's a problem, which is a human rights violation in general. To conclude the collaborative work, us as Jordanians or journalists in Jordan, what is a motivation that pushes female workers to leave Uganda and resort to or to immigrate to a certain country for work or etc. And what are the things or the challenges such a female worker could be facing in the place or the country she wants to resort to once she starts her work?
And as a student at Middle East University, what attracted you to participate in the fellowship?
In order to produce reports more accurate and realistic in partnership between Jordan and Uganda, and also the stereotype in a lot of times present unreality situations. Some convictions and some terms that are used in media, they don't tell the story the way it is in truth. So when we do this collaboration, we exchange the culture and reality between the two states, and accordingly, this positively reflected on us alternatively.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, now turning to you, Ruba, as one of the mentors and educators in this project, what was your experience? Why do you think it's important or do you think it's important for universities to participate in such collaborations?
Thank you, Sophia. Let me start by saying that cross-border journalism can actually save our humanity. I mean, in this fragmented world, and this is the title of the whole conference of ARIJ, and I cannot see a word that is more fragmented than the word we live in today. Cross-border journalism and collaboration on all the human sides is the only salvage we have. Because if we are able to use our interconnected world and use all the technologies to understand the stories of others, and look at people around the world, let's say, with a different eye, comprehend their suffering. Not only migrants. Migrants, of course, is a huge portion of the people that suffer everywhere in the world, especially after the wars and these things. But if we are able to tell the stories of those who are a little bit different, maybe in culture and the economic situation, and act like ambassadors of the truth, as Safa described, this in itself will create a better world. So I think it has a human side before the journalistic side, especially now that what we're seeing in Gaza and Palestine. If it wasn't for the collaborative work of journalists, we wouldn't hear a lot of stories. So it's true, we have eyes there for like professional journalists, but it is also in the hands of other people who can relate to the suffering of the people of Palestine and create stories that transcend borders, especially when there is oppression and muffling of voices. But going back to the experience of our students, we always say that universities are incubators of change, and they play a crucial part in creating the journalisms and changing the atmosphere of the upcoming generations. And it is true that we are accused sometimes of teaching theory over applications, and the true word is different. And that's what we try to bridge through collaborating with ILO and different organizations, and encouraging our students to reach out and try to, let's say, extend their abilities to the maximum. They can discover even things about themselves. I mean, at the beginning, we started with 40 students from Uganda and Jordan, and they went through a lot of workshops where they met seasoned journalists talking about their experiences. They were encouraged about the professors in the department who also have diverse experiences in different fields. I think this experience leading to the creation of the stories and the call out of the stories was in itself a life changer, at least at this early stage. They were able to talk to people that are similar in age, but maybe living different circumstances, but yet, in doing so, they realize that humans share more than that they think they do. And we were actually so proud of them. The stories came out really beautiful. They were comprehensive. They made sure to check facts, as Safa mentioned, and a few other students who worked there. And to be able also to write in a different language, that was something of huge importance for us.
That's excellent. We'll turn to you again, Ruba and Safa, in a moment, or a little bit later in our event. But now let's expand a little bit beyond Jordan and listen to students from Tunisia, Côte d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, and Kuwait speaking on video about their experience of cross-border collaborations in labour migration reporting.
Hello, everyone. This is Majid Karachi from the Middle East University. I participated with ILO. It was a unique experience in producing cross-border reports on Ugandan employment. It added a lot to my press work, supported by statements. I would like to thank the Media College at the Middle East, Dr. Saddam Al-Masharfi and Dr. Professor Ruba Zaidan for their collaboration, and to my special thanks to ILO and my advisors, Charles ARIJ Institution and Khalid Liqda, and my colleague or fellow journalists from Uganda who worked with me.
Hello, my name is Helen Bira from Makerere University and a former participant in the International Labour Organization Fellowship. In this fellowship, as I was writing my story, I chose an angle of leisure. Here in Uganda, we could see many domestic workers posting on social media, complaining of exploitation. They don't rest, they work tirelessly, they have no time for themselves, they don't enjoy. So this time around, I chose to write about leisure. I interviewed some people, and indeed I discovered, though we hear about those negative ideas, but I discovered that most do enjoy leisure.
As a worker in the investigative reporting institute in Tunisia, cross-border journalism is very important. Its role in revealing cross-border issues that necessitates networking among the journalists from different countries. Within this framework, there's a program, the twin program, or the sister program between the Institute for News, supported by ILO in Tunisia, in order to produce investigations and material, media material or journalistic material that covers immigration, cross-border issues like the immigration.
Étudiante en troisième année de journalisme à l'Institut des sciences et techniques de la communication, ISTC Polytechnique, en Côte d'Ivoire. Pour moi, les programmes transfrontaliers sont intéressants dans la mesure où ils constituent une opportunité d'avoir une ouverture d'esprit sur la façon d'aborder un sujet au-delà de nos frontières. Ils créent également une nouvelle opportunité d'apprentissage et pour moi, c'est génial d'en faire partie. Merci.
Hello, I'm Yusuf Al-Kafas, an English major from AUK and a journalist for the university magazine, The Voice. And over the past week, I have learned about cross-border collaboration as a way to improve our journalistic techniques. And I believe that we could further our ability to report on things like migration throughout the upcoming years, using the skills given to us through collaboration between borders. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Marianne Dwellen. I am a third-year journalism student at ARIJ University. I believe cross-border collaboration is important to create a networking system for us to be able to communicate and write better stories regarding topics like migration and labor. And I also hope that the skills and trainings we acquire will help us to write better reportings regarding on the topic.
It's nice to hear from some of these young people themselves, and I think a few are in the room. If you are here, if you could stand up or wave. Yes, hello. Wonderful. So hope you will also join us in the discussion that's to come. But perhaps now I will turn to you, Malik. As a lecturer at the main Tunisian University Journalism School, can you tell me a bit about why you think training students on labour migration reporting is important? What can the cross-border dimension sort of add to this training? And maybe a little bit about the pilot that you're currently working on, specifically on students from Ivory Coast and Tunisia.
Thank you very much, Sofia. I would, first of all, I would thank you, ILO and ARIJ for this invitation to participate in this cross-border journalism and labor migration. I will speak in Arabic. شكرا جزيلا صوفيا على هذا السؤال.
Thank you, Sophia, for this question. In our institution in Tunis, started at 2018 to work along with the National Body for Combating Trafficking and ILO. We worked with the students within the institution in order to produce reporting about labor migration in Tunis. We started with this program with news workshops. Then we developed into training workshops in order to benefit the media students, and we were able to create a competition about this issue. And some students who were crowned as with the best work in Tunis about the labor migration. And then we reached to this program with the students when we merged the students with the journalists who are practicing the profession daily basis. They exchange the experience with the journalists, and he's been practicing this profession daily basis. And then we started with this training. What we noticed is that, and to answer your question, is about the importance of this training or reporting about labor migration to create a commitment towards these humanitarian issues, especially that Tunisia now is crossing towards the European space. Now there are irregular or regular migrants who come to Tunis as a crossing country and then go to Europe. There are some problems and violations that happen against human rights regarding the labor inside Tunis, especially in exfoliating the citizens from the southern of Africa, especially the Côte d'Ivoire, according to the national report that we have in Tunis. There's commitment from the students in producing these reportings, and some of the students now graduated and licensed in this specific sector, and this we've been working on to provide the material and to, let's not forget that accompanying ILO in the Middle East, we launched the guide about how to comprehend in media with the issues of labor and the migration of labor is present in English and French and Spanish, also in Arabic. And this is very important. We launched this guide about how to work in preparing these reports about investigative reporting. This empowered the journalists and the students to follow this guide. And then in Tunisia, we have a specific experiment. It's to practice this guide in actual land, that each country has its own specificity. In the Arab world, we specialize this guide to the benefit of Tunis according to our context and the violations that are committed against the migrants when they work. This is very important. We created a network of the students who are working with the migration of labor. And now we continue the same direction through a new experiment is about being twins to create a collaboration between Uganda and Jordan. Same program, and I'm supervising as an educator at the institution in Tunis to create the bridges between the students in Côte d'Ivoire and Tunis. Why students in Côte d'Ivoire? Because their migration path was well known between Tunis and Côte d'Ivoire, and from Côte d'Ivoire into Tunis. And this path, there are a criminal network who are expoliating the citizens from Côte d'Ivoire to work in a criminal world, either in Tunis or in Côte d'Ivoire. According to statistics today, there are 50% of the victims of trafficking, the majority in forced labor. The majority are from foreigners from the south of Africa and from Côte d'Ivoire. That's why this is the reason we chose this operation, the collaboration between Côte d'Ivoire and Tunis to prepare reporting, cross-border reporting between the students that will be enable them in the future to work in this issue in a better way. It means this program today, we are way progressed some steps. Now it's about to be accomplished, and we have the students, like some of the students who are present here, our friend there, Samah Garsali.
Thank you very much.
They've been participating with us in this program, and we had our students in direct contact with contacting the Côte d'Ivoire in the journalism institution, and now they are working together about forced labor and other issues about expoliation of the migrant laborers in Tunis. Specifically, the program will be launched in producing some of the reports.
In the past years, and perhaps especially this year, there has been some very vehement statements made by political leaders in Tunisia about migrant workers, vilifying and scapegoating them for various problems in society.
Yes.
What role do you think journalists could play in terms of shifting public opinion or even political discourse on some of these topics, given the complex nature and foundations of some of these prejudiced attitudes?
This is a very important question, Sophia. We in Tunisia, we've been experience too many hardships and problems. There is a wave of exclusion against the immigrants, and there is also some prejudice, discrimination against the migrants, some of whom were also evacuated or maybe expelled out of their places. The role of the media was extremely important at this point in working with to collaborate together as journalists, as specialized journalists in the immigration issue, and in adopting a media discourse that is based on the ethics of this profession, and also advocacy with humanitarian issues or topics, as well as a narrative that is different from that promoted by the official authority. How did we do that? This was a process. It was through networking and through investigations and reports that does not merely highlight a certain stage with the influx of immigrants at that time into Tunisia, but by going back to the origins of the issue or the case, trying to study, examine, and present what are the immigrants subjected to, whether in their local places, or why did they migrate to Tunisia as a crossing point to Europe. We have highlighted some violations that took place against immigrant workers in Tunisia in terms of coercive exploitation, domestic exploitation, suppression, and also human or sexual harassment or exploitation. So many issues that we witnessed and we saw based on the national reports. We underscored the fragile or the poor press reports that in a way enabled the followers and the public opinion to have another narrative in contrast with the official narrative regarding the number of immigrants and the narrative promoted or marketed by some political parties or factions that would not accept immigrants inside Tunisia. Thus, the press work or the media work in this respect was based on the networking and reporting or preparing reports on such issues along with the narrative that is in parallel, that parallels the official narratives.
Very interesting. And let me take this opportunity just to pause and say that we welcome questions from the audience. I'm not quite sure of the logistics of how, but if anyone has a question, please feel free to raise your hand. And also online, you are welcome to post your questions in the chat box, and we'll make sure to get to them. I'd like to go back to the student experience and not take for granted that it's when you put students together from countries of origin and countries of destination that it's necessarily going to be that straightforward to be able to communicate, to be able to collaborate. We're talking about people who speak different languages, come from different cultures. So I'd love to hear a little bit more, Ruba and Safa, about what is the how is this done? What were some of the challenges that you faced speaking to Ugandan journalism students for the first time and trying to work together on something that was perhaps a new area to you both? Perhaps starting with you, Safa.
Yes,
actually, the lingual challenge was the biggest. The language was the biggest challenge that we were working on facing. Accordingly, we formed a team to work in that report, multi-tasks. Some were working in the field. We have different skills like English, for example, and communication. The others were working on gathering the data and analyzing them.
And Ruba, what about you?
Well, for me personally, coming back from a journalism background and having worked with international journalists everywhere, the language was not really a challenge. And I don't think it posed a huge challenge for the students at last. At the beginning, they were a little bit hesitant. But I believe that if you have a good angle of the story, I think journalism is a way of thinking. So if you can spot the problem area or the challenge or the story you want to talk about, language becomes like a tool, an easy thing to do. I'm not saying that it was a piece of cake, but with the help of automated translation methods and the help of other educators and their own personal strength as well, students like Safa, Majid, Nisreen, and many others we're proud of at Middle East University, were able to overcome this, especially taking into consideration that they were dealing with students of the same age group. I know it's far away, some of the challenges might be different, but you know, like youth face few challenges that are almost the same. I think one of the challenges were of how we are going to tell the story. There is a stereotype, maybe outside that I noticed, that says that domestic workers or migrants are facing a lot of inhumane treatment in Jordan. And I'm not saying that in some cases they do not. But the thing is being able to bridge the gap between what people there think and what we want to show them, and not in the way to beautify the situation by factual reporting. I think this was a mental block that they both worked to solve. And as an educator, I believe that this is an achievement in itself, being able to fully see the other person and put aside, let's say, a little bit of the prejudice to listen and understand and show the truth. Some of the stories I encouraged and very proud of were stories that talked about how domestic workers would spend their day. Like it has an optimistic, beautiful side. Some of the stories talked about, for example, where they buy their food in an environment that is different in culture. So by shedding light on all aspects, of course, we're going to talk about some cases of abuse and the suffering and the negative display, like the story that Safa worked on, but also being able to display an array of hope and let's say showing the positive side of working maybe in a different culture, along with factual reporting again. It shouldn't be like only propaganda. I think that was more challenging, and I'm happy they did that. And I'm also proud of the Faculty of Media at the university for being able to instill these values and present the students with such an hands-on experience. So that's about it.
Yeah, it's such an important principle and basic tool that all journalists should have the ability to interview migrant workers and to be able to kind of have a more multifaceted understanding of the migration experience. And yet, for many sort of journalists in this region and in other parts of the world, it is often sort of government officials or experts that are consulted when it comes time to write stories. And again, this echoes the session, the first session of the day that also mentioned this important topic. Malik, is this something that you think is also sort of an important element of how you train journalists and journalism students? The ability to be able to interview migrant workers themselves, to be able to go to the source in order to have pieces that are really sort of multifaceted.
Yes. يعني الطلبة وكذلك
Yes, the students and even the journalists, and I'm talking here about students, they have all the capacities to work on meeting the victims from all sorts of exploitation or human trafficking. In Tunisia, there are a number of organizations or commissions, including the National Commission to Combat Human Trafficking. It's a commission that works, and it has a partnership agreement with the Journalism and the News Sciences Institute to offer and to provide all the requirements, including statistics, research, and figures, data. There are also human rights. There are also NGOs and civil society institutions who work in the issue of asylum seekers and immigrants. We work on facilitating all of this. The students today have all the abilities because they have been They have been working in training and they know what are the statements or the expressions to use or vocabulary as they do the reporting, because they've done training in order to avoid any prejudice, discourse, or violence speech or hate speaks, of course, using the necessary vocabulary based on the international standards. And thus, students have all the abilities to prepare either written or audio or visual reports. We teach this at the News Science and Media Institute. We have a special course on immigration in partnership with ILO. We have incorporated a material or a course on human rights. There is an entire class or course on exploiting the labor hand within the framework of combating human trafficking. Along with this, we also teach the ethics of the profession in dealing with the videos and written and broadcasting reports and the relationship with children, how to deal or to handle how each and every daily reports. Today, we have students who are at a good professional level in investigative journalism and reportage or reports. They have an MA in investigative journalism. It's an MA specialized in this field. The majority students, as I teach in the university, the majority students offer suggestions or proposals about investigations into labor hand immigration in Tunisia.
That's, I think what you mentioned about using appropriate rights-based language is really important as well. Several years ago at the ILO, we produced a glossary that in Arabic and English that explained the use of appropriate terminology. For example, not using the phrase illegal migrant or servant or maid to describe a domestic worker. I think it's critical that students and journalists understand the reason why these words are not appropriate and to use the correct terminology. This isn't just a box-ticking exercise to be politically correct. There is a reason why we should not use such terminology. And I think it's interesting that, you know, over the last decade, I have seen that the discourse, not just in the media, but the political discourse has now started to evolve as well. And I think journalists play a really important part in that achievement.
Yes. هذه المشكلة الأساسية.
This is the basic problem that we have across the world. Even in the USA, I visited the USA twice, and in many cases, I found of the organizations and the official discourse rely on the expression legal immigration or child prostitution. This is something that doesn't exist in our community, because a child would not have the choice to be in that place. It is important to be sensitive towards such issues when you speak about the immigrants, and in addition to the stereotypes that children are being offered or women may be presented or represented, how to convince the victim about the work, but at the same time we protect the victims. So all of these are glossary that are used based on the glossary of terminology that is relied on and that is available at ILO on the internet, and how to rely or how to adapt the standards or the vocabulary. There is a difference between the infiltration of or maybe the evasion of immigrants and the human trafficking. Some of the agreements between the Arab states and the European states regarding migration they sometimes confuse the infiltration of workers and human trafficking. Sometimes it is to find a pretext towards expelling or deporting the immigrant workers from some European countries, and this is unfortunate.
If what Malik said is really important, we thank the ILO for taking the initiative and starting such projects. But in the face of, as he described, now we have world leaders spreading hate speech and stereotyping immigrants and refugees. And you know, in Jordan, I don't call it an issue of refugees because we treat everybody here as a citizen, but I mean in a world where refugees and immigrants are increasing with all that's happening. I think it's about time that what the ILO is doing, along with universities, to become like a style of living or part of a conduct, not only for the journalists. Now we have a lot of people sharing content. We have the citizen journalists, and they're also taking up space in the virtual world. So MEL, media, information, and literacy, I think is very important to be thought of, taking into consideration all the points that Malik mentioned and what you're doing at ILO. We need to educate people, or maybe enlighten them, because educate maybe is a harsh word, on how to use certain terms and avoid using others, because sometimes we are born with prejudices. It depends on which part of the world you're in. You find yourself using words and terms, maybe unconsciously, that might hurt others. And in this world where everything goes viral and virtual, I think it's about time that organizations, universities, and people who are interested in this, who believe in the freedom of speech, alongside preserving humanity, they all collaborate, not only to produce reports, but maybe to play a more important part on raising up a new, like, let's say, a global dialogue, which is happening, but we want it like to be more enforced and maybe involving more students to make sure that the next generations do not like imitate everything they say and try to change the world we live in somehow. It's a pressure on everyone.
Yeah, so it's a wonderful, though ambitious goal, and let me acknowledge that the ILO is one very, very small part of that, because of course there are many other not to mention, of course, ARIJ, which is really a beacon of hope in terms of promoting some of this rights-based dialogue and collaboration, but also other organizations and UN agencies. There were a couple of questions in the chat about whether there are future programs and fellowships for students and journalists. At this stage, no, but please do refer to our website where we will publish any new initiatives that we have. One long-standing initiative that we have over the last 80 years is a global media competition on labour migration reporting. We have had thousands of entries, but relatively few from Arab journalists. So we really encourage more journalists and more journalism students to apply for this competition, because indeed, as Ruba mentioned, this is part of what we hope is a community of practice, raising the visibility of good examples of reporting, and hoping that we kind of lead by example in terms of, showcasing journalists who have really tried very hard to not only use the right terminology, but really the right tactics and techniques to be able to present a more full, more nuanced and more complex picture on migration. So the winners of this year's global media competition will be announced on International Migrants Day on the 18th of December. So look out for that as well. We have just 2 minutes remaining. I don't see any hands up from the audience, but of course, please feel free to catch any one of us after this session. We hope that the topic of cross-border collaboration amongst journalists, amongst journalism students in reporting on labour migration continues to sort of grow in prominence. So perhaps just with the last 2 minutes, I'll give each one of you just 30 seconds to sum up some concluding thought. What do you think is the future of labour migration reporting or cross-border collaboration? What is the message that you have for the future? starting, well, actually, perhaps we'll go this way backwards. So I'll start with you, Ruba, just 30 seconds each.
Actually, as a journalist and an assistant professor, I look forward to being part of such projects that instill, as we said, the humanity, and also would love to work with ILO and other organizations that do care about the circumstances of the underprivileged. And I promise we can generate also very good investigative reports, because now investigative journalism is one of the tools to fight corruption. And this is very important. So I hope we work on future things.
This year and for the future, we witnessed a large participation in our institution in the competition of the ILO about the labor migration, which is a very positive indicator. Also, in the future about the program between Tunis and Côte d'Ivoire, and the students are collaborating in reporting in the international competition for next year as well. The future is cross-border collaboration between the students of journalism to prepare more elusive, conclusive reporting. In the forward, I look forward to regarding migrant. There are so many aspects that we want to cover. Maybe this fellowship is a base to go forward, and thanks a lot.
Thank you so much to my wonderful panelists, Safa, Helen, and Malik, and Ruba. And thank you so much to the audience and those joining us online. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you very much.